So I started as a programmer out of school. Started to put myself through college, but got too busy with work, and ended up sort of going full time into programming coding. Then became a systems architect. Went into the consulting arena, doing a lot of work for financial services all the way through the technical career. In '97, joined Deloitte as head of technology integration out of Australia. They moved me to Hong Kong in '99 to head up e-business practice. So I ran the Asia e-business practice for Deloitte. Then left Deloitte and joined Modem Media, which was the number one digital agency in the world at the time. So I had very strong, web and business consulting, plus sort of the creative media side from a competency perspective. Clients were like HSBC, Cathay Pacific, players like that. I ended up working with HSBC for 10 years on digital strategy. So while I was there, we deployed the first internet banking, the first mobile app,
Wow.
the first online product, the very first usability study done for any retail bank anywhere in the world. We conducted out of Hong Kong in like 2000. On the leading edge of all that. And then in the mid noughties, around 2005, I wrote a report for HSBC on what the future of banking would look like in the 2020s.
Was that a public
And
report or was that for HSBC
that was for HSBC internally.
internally?
And that report went to the board, was sponsored by Paul Thurston, the head of retail in Asia at the time, went on to head up retail globally. And that was where I saw firsthand the inability of even a major bank like HSBC to understand what was coming at them. And so I took that report, HSBC 2.0, and turned it into my first book, Bank 2.0.
Oh, wow.
And that became a bestseller in a dozen languages in 18 countries in banking, and was on the best, top 10 bestsellers ranking for like 5 years. And, now I've done Bank 4.0 in 2019. It's been on the bestsellers list for 6 years, the top 10 banking books on Amazon. And, I had also two futurist books in there, Augmented and the Rise of Techno-Socialism. But in 2010, I also started Movin, which was the world's first mobile neobank. And so that was the first banking app anywhere in the world where you could order a debit card inside the app without a signature. So we launched that in late 2012. Now, keep in mind, one of the reasons Jason and I get on so well, Keith, is that he had also launched Perk Street, like a couple of years before us. Well, I think 1 year before us. But Perk Street wasn't a mobile app, right? So they had a card program and, they had online, but they didn't have mobile support. We were mobile native. And, as the way banking apps have gone since then, that's I think the distinction. But we're a little bit too early. In there, I also started the podcast Breaking Banks. And since that's gone so well, we've spun off and we now host, I think, a dozen podcasts on the Provoke Network. It's Jason, JP, and I own. And then I have my own speaking agency, which people like Jim Maroose rather, and Ross Dawson and, other players like that are speakers for that agency. And also run the number one futurist podcast globally called The Futurists, as you can tell by the signage behind me. And I'm just about to launch our first conference in Dubai, which is called the Futurist Summit. So about 600 people, 30 of the world's top 50 ranked futurists are going to be there. So, I'm doing a lot more of that cutting edge, next generation sort of super forecasting, emerging technology stuff these days as well. So yeah, that's sort of a brief introduction of how I got to where I am today.
Oh, perfect. Keith, sounds like you need to pack your bags.
No, I've never been to Dubai. I was just thinking about going to Dubai. That must be fun. 600
You should come.
futurists.
I'll give you free tickets.
Oh, I'll come.
600 attendees, 30 of the world's top 50 futurists. Brian Cox is doing the opening keynote on day one. And day two, we have Commander Scott Kelly, who spent a year on the space station.
Wow,
so really phenomenal guests.
Wow. Wait, Brian Cox, is that the actor?
No, Brian Cox, the experimental astrophysicist. He's always the one you see on
the guy from
the actor.
Succession. The
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
older guy. His
yeah,
name's
yeah.
Cox. I forget his
Yeah,
first
yeah,
name.
no, that's right. But no, but they
Yeah,
both have the same name. But
yeah.
one is he used to be in a boy band when he was younger, and then he became this
Nice.
amazing expert on black holes and leading string theory and stuff like that. So
From
he's
a boy
he's all
band.
like, yeah,
That should
yeah,
be a
no, but
movie. That should be a
he's
movie.
wicked smart. He's got
Yeah,
he's wicked smart. So
But see, Brett,
that's awesome.
you're hitting on some of the things that that make these kinds of conversations special. And as Keith alluded to earlier, you have Trevillian, and then we have our Trevillian Communications arm, which has a couple content channels. And the one that we were calling you for here today was for Banking Plus. The
yep,
Banking Plus professional profile series, we get into a lot of that stuff. A lot of our readers want to know who the human being is because they can read what they can read on your LinkedIn page and they read your books. But we have found that there are amazing moments in the lives of these people that lead them down a path and into a direction to where they are now sitting. And the story about him being in a boy band, it's like that doesn't come out everywhere.
yeah,
So
yeah.
one of the things that I wanted to ask you was a little bit about what your life is
I
like.
was in a band too, not a boy band. I was in a band too when I was younger.
Well,
Boy
yeah,
band
what
and
kind
a
of
black
music?
hole. Man. What kind of
And
music?
I fly airplanes. That's as a hobby. So that's something I guess not a lot of people would know about me.
What
Scuba
kind of
dive
airplane?
and fly. So the most type experience I've got is in a Cessna 210, which is a 6-seat single aircraft, and a Cirrus SR-20, which is an amazing aircraft.
We will
And
get
what did
some
you play in
pictures.
the band? What was your instrument in the band?
Guitar. I was lead singer and guitarist.
Oh, wow. Right out front.
Yeah.
What is the name of the band?
It was called No Exit.
No exit.
The joke was once we start playing, you're not allowed to leave.
Ah, what type
We
of
just
music was it? Was it
You
rock
know,
music?
pop, so like,
Pop.
Huey Lewis and the News, Dire Straits, a
Okay.
bit of Van Halen, like wedding parties, anything stuff.
Gotcha, gotcha. Did you dance up there or was there no
No, I was
dancing?
on a
No,
dancer.
okay.
That's why I
Okay.
had the guitar because it was a prop. I didn't have to
Yeah.
dance, you know.
Well, now you could probably, for charity, auction off some home movies of your band playing at this point. You
Is it on
know?
Yeah,
YouTube?
that's back when I had hair, John.
Yeah,
So
Ah.
we'll be whipping it all over the place. Probably you and me both. Yeah,
the
Watch
it's
the
blonde
cheat
interesting.
code.
afro.
There's a lot of correlations between people who are, their brains operate under a coding, set of algorithms and music. We have a number of
Yeah.
people that are in cybersecurity, and we have a guy we just interviewed the other day who was a drummer in a band. And it's just interesting how,
And language and maths,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Was there a when you were in like grade school, did you find was there like an early moment in your life that was very influential to you that thought to yourself that you either point you in the direction of music or point you in the direction of coding and futuristic concepts? Like, was there ever
Mm.
like a mentor or somebody that guided you along that path early on?
Look, I always was fascinated by technology. It was a real, I love technology and everything I could learn about it. I started to teach myself to code at around the age of 13. I'd
Wow.
had a paper route. I'd run a paper route for a number of years, getting up at 5:30 in the morning. It was brutal. I saved up enough to get myself what you call a BMX bike, right?
Uh-huh.
You know, but by the time I hit 13, I was like, I was very entrepreneurial as a kid. I'm like, now I'm going to get a computer. So I sold my BMX bike and bought myself a Commodore VIC-20, which
Wow.
incidentally is also the platform upon which Elon Musk learned to code, right? So taught myself to code by essentially buying these magazines at the local drugstore, right? Which would have all these games in them, which were just sheets of code. So you'd have to type in the code off the page to get the game working on the console, and that was the way I learned syntax and programming. So
Wow.
then when I got into a select entry school. In Melbourne, Australia, Melbourne High School. So select entry was you have to sit an entrance exam, 1,500 kids come in and 300 get selected. I was fortunate enough to get into their program. And their, computer science was a primary, experience for me. But by the time I graduated high school, I was as good as any sort of commercial programmer, right? Just because I love to learn to code. I knew sort of 3 languages at that point. I got in trouble at school for hacking into the teacher administration at one point because I was curious.
What? No,
Um,
why did you time out? Time out. Time out. Were you trying to change your grades? Let's be
no,
honest.
I wasn't. I was
Yeah.
just like, I
Okay.
wonder what's in
Yeah.
there, And I
I
wasn't sure.
wonder
I didn't
what's
even
in
think
there.
about that at the time, but that was inferred, obviously. But
Feels like a Ferris Bueller moment right there.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
absences.
Yeah, but all good, all good. But so I went straight into coding out of school, like maybe 3 months after I finished high school. Before I started college, I got offered a job, and so I started coding right away and decided to do college part time. And then 2 years into that process, I was doing a Bachelor of Commerce. I ended up dropping out. And then in 97, when I joined Deloitte, I ended up going on an entrepreneurship program with them that led to a mature age MBA slot at Bond University. So that was in 98. I started at Bond University doing the MBA. And a year later, I dropped out halfway through the program to move to Hong Kong.
Mm.
And then with being on the ground in Hong Kong for 8 months, by December that year, I was teaching the MBA program in Hong Kong on e-commerce. So that was a pretty interesting journey.
Oh
Oh
my
wow.
goodness. Wow.
Jeez.
And
So
where do you live now? You're in Thailand now?
I spend half my time in Bangkok, Thailand, and half my time in Dubai. So I run like 6 different businesses. So, I have to do a lot of travel. I do 25, 30 countries a year as a speaker. And it's going to be a big year this year because the new book has just come out. So, well, it comes out in September 15th, branch tomorrow. I guess we're going to talk about that too.
Yep.
With the new book coming out, it always sort of produces a bit of a spike in travel and speaking. But that's part of the business.
You
When
had me at a newspaper delivery boy because I was
There you go.
also a newspaper delivery boy. It's a lost art. It doesn't
It
even
is.
exist anymore. But
No.
I remember getting up and getting out and getting those papers done.
I
this
remember
is
coming home one very cold winter morning, and I hadn't had adequate protection in terms of gloves and so forth. And we had one of those old gas heaters, which blew hot air out. And I burnt the skin of my fingers because my fingers were so cold that I couldn't feel when I was, put them on the heater. So anyway,
Mm.
yeah. It brings
Character
back
building.
memories just
It's
talking about
character
it. Yeah,
building.
exactly.
That
Made me the
is.
man I am today.
Yeah.
Well, it did, for me, it taught me an awful lot about customer service and stuff. Because if there was a problem with the paper, I'd get a call from a subscriber and say, like, my sports page was messed up or whatever you got it, and I'd have to get back out, get back on the bike, and go back out and deliver it.
Yeah, I hated those times. I remember one morning I left a paper stuffed under the gate for one customer, and the paper blew all over because a storm came up, and so I had to go down and clean their yard out. I remember
Oh,
that one.
yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah,
character.
yeah.
the Society of Paperboys. You guys need like a secret tattoo.
We're in recovery, John. It's a
Yeah.
long recovery.
Yeah. So Brett,
Yeah.
a lot of your career kind of was started in the 90s, and being futurist minded, like you said, you were always interested in things like science and like
I was
when
also a big sci-fi fan, John.
that's what I was going to ask you. Like
Yeah.
movies, is there favorite
No,
movie?
I mean, I remember growing up. A couple of things really stood out to me from sort of, the only movie I ever saw with my dad. Actually, there was two. One was Star Wars in '77, and the other was In Search of Noah's Ark. They're the only two movies I ever saw with my dad in a cinema. So you can tell what sort of household I grew up in. But I also remember after school watching Star Trek, reruns
Yep.
on the black and white TV, that was hand me down from my parents, and then. I remember going to see 2001, A Space Odyssey, sometime in the 70s, and just being blown away by that. So, yeah, I mean, I think even at a young age, I was very much
You're sucked
tuned
in.
into that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did your
Yeah.
parents do for a living?
My dad was in sales. He's a very good communicator. He's retired, of course, these days, but he was in sales, national sales, for office equipment related stuff. And my mum, did a few different jobs. She worked at a squash court for some time. I remember going there and becoming really good at playing squash. And then my dad had a travel agency for a few years after that, for like a decade, and that was sort of, I think, where I got a bit of my travel bug as well. And then he
Yeah.
became a magistrate in later in his career, so
Wow.
he was a bail justice. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Were they when you initially started to show signs of being interested in coding, were they 100% on board? Did they not understand it?
They
Um,
didn't understand it, but they were supportive. They were really
yeah.
supportive. I mean, Dad was like, "Well, if you want a computer, you're going to have to get a job." You know,
Yeah,
like,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there was no expectation that he would. Although he did buy me my first IBM, XT PC, right? So, um, and then I started upgrading it with hard disks and stuff later on. But yeah, they were very supportive. Same with the select entry school program that I went for. I remember, that was going to take 2 hours a day of sort of traveling in and out to this school because we were quite a bit out of the city. But they were very supportive. They really got behind me on that stuff. So I'm grateful for that.
And do you have siblings? And if so, are they similarly minded? Or they have careers that
My
somehow
brother, he's a few years younger than me, but he is similarly bald. Um,
Also a paper boy.
Yes. I don't think, no, he didn't do a paper route. I'm trying to think what he did. He did have some part-time jobs, but yeah, I'm stretching with that now. But no, he's in IT. He's in IT project management. He's quite a good speaker as well. He's never done it professionally, but yeah, no, he's still in Melbourne. My dad there as well in Australia. So
I'm gonna make a bold statement here. I'll go out on a limb and say you probably thought of the e-blast before anyone else. Being a futurist paper boy, you're like, there's got to be a better way, and you probably
yeah,
thought of e-blasts.
look, I think I mean, look at the future of banking stuff. Look at the podcast. Like when we're pre-show when we're discussing that, Keith and I, he was like, "Wow, 2013." Like there wasn't many people doing podcasts at that stage. So but that's also sometimes a problem. Like moving. We were the first to do that stuff. Like design patterns that Movin came up with are used all across the industry now. So, for example, we were the very first mobile banking app that used as its homepage something other than just listing your accounts with your balances. We were the first app that we had a spending meter that showed you how much money you'd spent this month, and the whole app would turn red if you were spending more money than typical, or turn green if you were spending less money than typical. And we had behavioral savings stuff in there and contextual credit and things like that. I mean, it was there's most banks still don't have that. We were the first app in the world to be able to turn off your debit card in the app. Right? We were the
Oh
first
wow.
app in the world that gave you a real-time transaction receipt on your phone from tapping your phone on a pause or from just even using your card. You would still get a notification on the phone faster than the pause machine to print it off a piece of paper, with instant categorization of your spend. Like if you were shopping you bought a coffee in Starbucks, it show how much you'd spent on dining out for the month so far and whether you were up or below that. So it was a really interesting sort of behavioral mechanic thing. But this was 2012 when we launched
Wow.
this, right? And like there's still banks not doing that
I was
stuff
just
today.
gonna
So
say that. Yeah,
yeah.
there are banks that aren't opening accounts online.
Yeah.
Um,
And
it's
so I
just
mean that's part of the problem is when you're that far ahead in terms of your thinking cycle, because that's how I perceive the world. Sometimes it doesn't fit with the commercial timing. So we're moving, by 2014, we already had 250,000 customers. And today, if you had 250,000 customers, you could go and raise $80 million
mm,
off that, right? But we couldn't raise any money back in 2013, even with that success that we'd had, because just the market was just not ready at the time.
Yeah.
you're I love the story about how your report for HSBC became the essentially the blueprint for Bank 2.0. And we reviewed, we took a look at all your books, and topic after topic has materialized. you know, is there anything that surprised you about what some of your futuristic predictions were? Is there anything that proved different than you expected? I mean, how
Sure.
did yeah, how do you think everything panned out?
Well, I mean, so to give you an indication, that report I wrote for HSBC in 2005, November 2005. Um, in that report, we forecasted or predicted, if you prefer, forecasting is more accurate, that by 2015, that mobile would be the biggest channel for the bank, internet would be number two, and branches would be number three or four behind ATMs. We weren't exactly sure of that, but we knew that internet and mobile together would have surpassed the branch. And that's sort of what really helped me realize how not ready for this future the bank was. Even at the board of HSBC with the exec team there, the senior execs, the exco, they were like, "You're crazy. That's not going to happen by 2015."
Hmm.
And that's exactly, like almost exactly the numbers that we had anticipated, came about. In 2012, I wrote a book called Branch Today, Gone Tomorrow.
Mhm.
So the new book, Branch Tomorrow, is a sequel to that. But in that book, I predicted, because, this was 2012. So I predicted by 2030 that the number of branches in the United States would be halved
Hmm.
from what it was in its peak in 2008. And people like this, they used to call me the death of branch guy, right? In those days. And we're right on track for those numbers. Those forecasts are bang on. But I also predicted I predicted 2016 that mobile wallets would overtake plastic cards. I predicted that in Bank 2.0. I was wrong. It didn't happen until 2017. Right.
Ah,
So that one I got slightly wrong. But the one I got seriously wrong was I thought that by 2018, no one globally would be using checks, but I didn't
Yeah.
factor in America.
Ah,
mm,
I didn't factor in the lack of common sense. No, I'm sorry. I'm just
yeah,
joking.
right. No, it's romantic to write a check. You have to, you got to sign your name and everything. It's part
yeah,
of the
takes
romanticism. But
time. Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
Brett.
try teaching a 20 something how to write a check today, bro.
on their
Yeah,
name.
yeah,
Doesn't
Brett.
happen.
On a follow up question. For when you were talking about mobile, back in the '90s, were you thinking what we have today with smartphones? What were you thinking
I mean,
mobile wise?
I think by 2005, you did have Palm Pilots, you had the IDEO and some,
BlackBerry and
yeah,
BlackBerry, yeah.
Crackberries, yeah, which
Crackberry.
iconography. And, one of the things that if you look back at my book Augmented 2015, I talked about how the macro trend to understand, and be able to forecast these things is understanding that in terms of compute technology, two things were happening in compute. One was that the ability of computers to process information was increasing because of Moore's law, and like we're getting 2x improvement in chip capabilities every 18 months because of Moore's law. But on top of that, we were getting software acceleration of those capabilities. So as we got more compute power and more RAM, the software became more powerful. And one of the things that we focused on throughout that evolution was making it simpler or easier to operate. So
Yeah.
in the 1960s, you needed to be working at a university to even be able to operate a computer, right? And then
Mm,
it was punch cards, and then you had machine code, and eventually we had BASIC and other languages like that, which were making it easier. Now we just vibe code. We talk to an AI and
oh
does the
God.
coding, right? So
Yeah.
this is the two vectors of technology that, as technology becomes more adopted in society, the power of that technology improves rapidly and its usability improves significantly. So that at a certain point in the future, near future, you'll have ability to access infinite compute power anywhere, anytime, without any interface. Like you'll be able to get a screen pop up in your smart glasses. You'll be able to talk. You'll be able to use gestures or things for entry. And computing will be extremely intuitive. So that's the path. So we just have to work out where in that adoption line we are, or what sort of, in terms of to get next, what are the technological breakthroughs or the policy breakthroughs, or, the societal shifts that might be required to go to the next stage, right?
Yeah. And do you remember your first interaction with the internet when you actually? I remember
The
mine with the
first,
two with the
yeah,
AOL dial up, and then you boom. I was like, this is gonna change. I didn't think I was
no,
14 at
I
the time, but
actually
yeah.
visited Melbourne University and saw them running the early pre-internet, so pre-browser packet switching network, which would have been part of sort of the not the ARPANET, but what came after that in terms of the basic web infrastructure at the university level. And I saw them using emails, and I thought that was pretty cool. But obviously, 95 was when we had the big commercial breakout, of course, of commercial web. There's some sites were on in 94, but in 95, I bought my own internet service provision business. So in 95, I was actually doing dial-up modem access to ADSL backbone for my own clients and sold that franchise off to some company. And yeah, but that's how I became the head of e-business at Deloitte, because I owned an ISP, so I must know about the internet.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Late
Anyway.
90s was crazy. And did you think? And sorry, John, to take over here a little bit, but did you think when you kind of got into the internet or saw how it could, did you think automatically how this is going to be used from a corporate or business level, and
Yeah.
how this is going
Well,
to
I mean,
change it?
this is what I learned that commercially was very powerful, right? Is the ability to forecast the future and help people prepare for that. And if you do it far enough out and with enough impact, when that future emerges, they remember that, oh, the first time I heard this was from that guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what has built my platform as a futurist. But what's interesting, the way you sort of describe that, it's actually quite accurate, is the way I perceive the world and the way I process information is with that futurist lens always.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever something is happening, whether it's a political announcement or, a major technological trend, I'm playing it out 5, 10, 20, 30 years out, thinking about how that's going to, what implications that's going to have. And then I dive down into that with expert futurists on the podcast. So I get in, a deep knowledge on like energy transformation or next generation genetic engineering and stuff like that, so that I can understand those trends even better. So yeah, I've sort of surrounded myself with a machine that helps me to sort of stay in that space. But obviously, it's what it's at my core in terms of what drives me is that potential human progress,
Yeah,
right?
you must have a
I think
lot of
that so for me, I'm sorry, for me that begs a
yeah.
question though. In your role as predictor, as future looker, how much of what you do is merely observing forward versus actually changing forward? In other words, as
Mm.
you kind of ferret out a trend and make it public, do you automatically change that trend in some way?
I mean, I think that's implied. I wouldn't. I mean, if you think about the banking space, then I think some of the examples I've already given you, and in terms of the book, I mean, the fact that Bank 4.0 is still on the top 10 bestsellers of banking, it was number one yesterday, after 6 years, is indicative of the strength of the message from a longevity perspective. In terms of information. And so it's been pretty well trusted, and that has given me a vehicle for a ton of influence in the industry. And that's backed up by, the speaking stuff I do and things like that as well. So yeah, I have created a platform for the purpose of helping businesses and, executives sort of get through these transformation zones, and, it's also, I feel it's incumbent upon me, having such a clear vision of where this is going, to articulate that so people can make those sort of assessments themselves and sort of think about what that means for their career and their business. The problem I've noticed though is, Daniel, is that the most people don't have the ability to think exponentially, right? So I'll give you an example. Someone will look at ChatGPT 5 right now. You'll hear someone say this in the next few months, and they'll say, ChatGPT is never going to take my job, right? When someone's talking about tech non-employment. What they don't see is they don't see the scaling laws in AI. They don't see the improvement we've made in AI in just the last 2 years. And they don't understand that every major CEO of every AI company is talking about the major return on investment on AI is going to be removing human capital out of the workforce to optimize operations of corporations. That is the intent of the AI industry. So, for everyone that says, oh, it's not going to take my job, they can't see that intent of the market and that sort of exponential, improvement in AI that we're seeing. So I feel it's incumbent on me to have those conversations so that we're better prepared for when the time comes, so that it's not like, doesn't get down to, well, society's going to imminent collapse is upon us because we didn't think about this.
And that's a good answer. That answers my question quite nicely. Thank you.
All right, cool.
Well, so you're teeing us up for a segue into branch tomorrow with that answer. But I did have one thing I wanted to ask you beforehand, because I couldn't wait to ask you this. So taking a look at your background, you are a trusted futurist for like 18 different countries. I mean, governments. And
Yep.
Who was first? And how did you feel did you make that phone call? Did they call you? Tell us that story.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember meeting just after Bank 2.0 came out. I met in that year. I met regulators in probably 5 countries because it was really the first book that had gone into digital banking in that way, and so there was a vacuum, and I was, a voice that was getting a lot of traction because I was also very early on social media at the time, so I was able to use that. It's much harder to make traction on social these days than what it was back then, I guess. And the core of people I interacted with on social media were tech guys in banking who believed the same stuff and needed that champion to sort of help them push that message, which was also part of why I chose the approach with the books that I did, because I had the realization, being in HSBC, trying to get them to understand my report, that think about all the other innovators in these organizations facing that same resistance. They need someone putting a very clear vision and message of this future forward so they can go to their CEO of their bank. And I heard this story so many times back in those days where some, head of innovation or head of web or digital or something would come to me and they'd say, I got your book and I went and bought my CEO a copy. I slapped it on his desk and say, don't listen to what I'm saying. Read what this guy said, and then the CEO would read it and he'd buy a copy for every manager in the company. Like I heard that story so many times in those early days. So that really gave me an amazing platform for sort of being able to talk about this stuff for the last few years.
Wow. Yeah, and you're so right. I mean, many times there will be people that are trying to explain something to other people in their company, and they could say it 5 different ways. And it's no offense to them, but as soon as there's a respected author that's saying the same thing, now things start to happen. So,
and I worked hard to get that authority, right? I put lots of case studies in and did a ton of research. But probably, John, if I don't mind. So sorry, I jumped in because I thought about your initial question there.
How cool!
It was very cool. But I tell you what was even cooler. The coolest moment for me. Well, there was 2. So 2014, I was invited to the White House by the National Economic Council, the head of banking and markets for the administration back then. Had breakfast in the wardroom with my co-founder Alex Syon. It was really fun, right in the West Wing, right underneath the Oval. And then a few years later, 2018, in January 8th, 2018, my phone started blowing up. And it came out, it was a report in China that President Xi had my book on his bookshelf when he gave his national address to the nation. And so all the Chinese netizens, they scour his bookshelf and they saw my book. And it was only one of 2 books that were talking about artificial intelligence. And so, I feel like I've made a dent. Let's put it that way.
That's awesome. That's a great story. My God. All right. Well, look, hey, let's branch tomorrow. It's coming out mid-September. tell us a little bit about it. I mean, obviously, I think we're following a trend with all of your book and all of your books and your information. I got to tell you, the community bank world. I mean, and, you know, there are various layers to community banks, right? It's kind of everybody kind of agrees 20 billion and under. The smaller you go under 20 billion, the more quote unquote community they can be. Um, there are some new banks launching in the United States this year that we've interviewed, and they're very proud of building a new branch network, and they are going all in on branch network.
Yep.
There was a bank president we interviewed probably a year ago who said that he understands and believes that the AI and mobile banking and everything is it's here to stay and it's only going to get bigger. But the Gen Alpha banker, when it comes time for them, they don't even know what good customer service is. They may never have good customer service in their financial career, but at their bank, they're going to rely on branches and they're going to rely on that in person, and that is what's going to differentiate from everyone else. So tell us a little bit more about Branch tomorrow, and if you could dance around some of those statements that you
Sure. So I guess in terms of what we see globally, and this was a surprise to me. One of the things I set out to do was sort of take a global temperature of what was happening with branches. I suspected that branches globally had been in decline for some time, but I didn't know the exact year. So, and it's very difficult to get published information about branch numbers historically. Central banks hide that information, these days, particularly because of the decrease in numbers, right? Because the press
they don't
will
want to start a
report on it.
run.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. Not just a run, but they don't want to erode confidence in the banking sector by saying the modality. There's an easier explanation, of course. Modality shifting, more people use mobile than ever before, and so as a result, we have to right size networks to do that. But then you do get the issue, and we cover this off in the book, that there is a community element to branch banking, which in many cases, one example we talked about in the book was Calabria region, where you'd actually have had an increase in financial exclusion because branch numbers have declined. The problem with this is trying to enforce this the way the US does with the CRA, or stopping banks from closing branches if they're, the last branch in town, for example, that at some point this breaks because it's not the job of corporations to provide community infrastructure, right? That's a role of government, traditionally, at least, unless you can heavily incentivize them. But the incentives are becoming less because customers just aren't engaging enough in the branch to make them economically viable anymore. So this is the big shift. So 2015 was the year we hit peak branch globally. And this is measured by looking at the G20 economies and all of the EU economies as the largest branched economies in the world, right? Developing economies tend to have much lower branch density and continue to catch up. But even there, we're seeing branch numbers level out. So the only G20 nation where branch numbers are flat right now is India. Everywhere else has been in decline for some time.
Why is that, Steve?
Well, so I was getting to that. Good question. And it's the right question to ask. And if you do surveys of customers these days and ask them, what's the most important channel for you, they'll often say branch. Or where would you go if you wanted to ask about a product or something like that? I'll go to the branch. But that's not what customer behavior indicates today, right? Customer behavior shows that people are abandoning the branch because they have much better access to technology like mobile and so forth. It just doesn't require them to go to the branch as often. And the other thing is that the modality of banking is shifted towards mobile and towards wallets. So this year, mobile wallets will account for twice the number of transactions globally than plastic cards and tokenized plastic cards. So this is Apple Pay Wallet and Google Pay Wallet and so forth. That only makes up about 30% of retail commerce payments this year. And so mobile wallets are dominating, and the fastest growing banks in the world are all neobanks: Nubank, WeBank, Revolut, MyBank, right? And in fact, if you look at the top 20 retail fintechs today versus the top 20 retail banks, the data is shocking. The top 20 fintechs already command 4.1 billion customers. The top 20 retail banks, 2.7 billion. It's not even close. Right. So that the fact is the most efficient, fastest growing banking organizations in the world now are all digital acquirers of customers. And that's where the innovation is occurring.
I think it's interesting because it's almost like if I'm reading in between the lines and looking behind the curtain here, it's almost like if your bank is very efficient with its delivery of its products and services, if excuse me, if a customer has a question, they will go to their mobile app or they will go to the internet. If they have a problem that the non-human process cannot solve, then they need a banker and then they go into a branch, right? So really, the better you are at delivering your product or service, the less the necessity for the branch. But is the branch ever
Well,
going to go away?
I'll take that one step further. There's a great quote in the book from Henry Ma. Henry Ma is the chief information officer at WeBank, which is the largest digital bank in the world, right? 430 million customers in 10 years. Now, that in itself is telling. You could not build a bank with 430 million customers with infinite budget using branches in 10 years. You just couldn't execute on that. It doesn't matter how much money you had, you couldn't bring in that scale of customers. Digital is the only way to do it. He takes it further though, rather than it just being about growth and acquisition of customers. He says, and 98% of their customer service inquiries are handled by AI today, right? His position is, if you need to speak to a human, then that is a design failure in the bank. Because today the technology is such that you shouldn't ever need to speak to a human. Now, granted, WeBank doesn't have as complex products as some other banks have, including investment products and and things like that. But having said that, I think that argument is absolutely reasonable, especially given the advancements we're going to see in AI over the next few years. And the other piece of it is purely the capabilities of AI. You listen to Eric Schmidt today. He says that the best physicists, the best scientists, the best mathematicians in the world next year are going to be AI, right? And what that means in terms of information asymmetry, where you used to go and visit a human because they knew more than you about banking or more than you about medicine or more than you about tax preparation or more than you about accounting, whatever it is, there will be an AI that will be better than any human in the world at doing that stuff. So that's the challenge that we get into with the thinking that, okay, if branches isn't about acquiring customers, it's there as a support mechanism, then the key problem you've got for that is AI is going to get better fast and is going to compromise the human differentiation on advice. And secondly, the economics of the branch are no longer supported by advice, right? Maybe for more, if you're in a high mortgage area and things like that, there's still some value for those. But I think branches will remain in some form. I just don't think most people will ever think about visiting a branch unless they have very significant, portfolios, or they have a very, specific application of like a commercial banking arrangement that they need or something like that. I just don't think most people will think to visit a branch in the future. And I think what we call a bank in 2050 won't look anything like the community banks that we have in the States today. So that's the reality of where the tech is going to take us.
It's interesting. And I agree with a lot of what you said. The MO of community banks and the MO of credit unions, right? So what's the same flag every credit union plants in the ground? We have members. We don't have customers. And then
Sure, sure,
explain what
sure.
a member is.
I did America's credit unions 2 weeks ago, so I'm definitely familiar with that terminology.
Right? Community banks, their flag that all of them plant in the ground. Our employees live next door to you,
Sure.
right? So this threatens the entire history of what
Yes.
community banks stand for. So if
Well,
I'm the president
it's
of
a
a,
redefinition of what banking is. I
they
mean,
have to
it's
relearn the
yes.
pitch, right?
Yeah.
A community bank's sales pitch is our board. Number one, decisions are made locally. Right? We don't ship your decisions off to North Carolina or someplace. We make them, unless you're in North Carolina, we we make them locally here. And we will come visit your site to inspect and be with you and hold your hand every step of the way. So there is a community banks provide, especially for business lending, a physical on-site element to the business owners who are operating and have a loan through their bank.
Sure.
So I think there's a definite there's a need to pay attention to this if you're a community banker. However, how would you suggest a bank position itself? Because look, there are boards who are going to ignore everything you say, and they're
Of
going to
course.
ignore all the warning signs, right? And there's going to be one champion inside the bank somewhere, and that person might not be in the boardroom, it might not be on the executive committee, it might be a teller someplace, raising their hand, right? Saying we need to start to look at this, we need to start to plan. You have to crack the ice before you can break the ice. So is there, other than, I mean, the answer might be buy my book. I might be walking into a sales
No,
pitch here.
I mean, look, the easiest way to understand this is twofold, right? Is these are two very simple questions which will tell you everything you need to know, right? Is look at the amount of footfall into your branches per customer per year. So that is how many times do your customers on average visit the bank branch in a year, and do that and look back 20 years if you've got the data, and look at it on a trending basis. And that will tell you everything you need to know, first of all. The second piece is just, do the same thing, but do the viability, economic profitability of the branch, each branch across the board on a blended basis, and look at that over the last 10 years, right? In terms of that, and then compare that with how revenue on digital has changed. And then look at WeBank and Alipay and Nubank and see how effective they are at converting a $5 or $7 acquisition cost into a lifetime value that's even more than what you get from your average current account holders or checking account holders.
And you know who can do this analysis in probably less than a minute? AI.
Yes, I mean that's going to be
thing.
it's true. And that's the thing is if you look at the numbers, they're only going one way. Now, if you say, all right, well, we're going to buck the trend, and we're going to be the one bank that can still differentiate from branches in this, atrocious environment for the economics of branching, then I would say to you, I don't know how, because all of the data indicates we're moving behavioral away from branches. And this has nothing to do with how cool your branch is, how much technology you've got in the branch, how good the staff are in the branch. Whether it looks like an Apple store or not, whether it's got enough screens up, none of that has impact on branch behavior when it comes to customers, because if you want to take people out or back, you want to get people back into the branch, you've got to take their phones away from them. Yeah. That's the only way you're going to do that. And that's not going to happen. In fact, with AI and personal AI, we're going to have even more technology put in front of us that can do, functions that we would have normally said could only be done in the branch. I mean, let's think about it. 20 years ago, if you wanted a balance on your account, well, not 20 years, 30 years ago, if you wanted the account balance, you'd have to drive to a branch or drive to an ATM. And then maybe in the 80s and 90s, you had telephone banking, but still, it'd take you a few minutes to get on there. It didn't work all the time. Now you can pop up your app and get your balance instantaneously. So the reality is that there's a lot of functionality or utility in banking that is now just going to essentially be embedded in the world around us with this technology layer that makes it so much more accessible, so much more inclusive, and also will be better personalized for you, that the branch really isn't hugely relevant in that world. Now, there is still some role for some community type activities and things like that. Maybe that's pop-up branches. Maybe it doesn't have to be permanent branching capabilities. But ultimately, if you look in 10 years time, John, the biggest banks in the world are all going to be digital pure plays. And why we know that is the biggest bank in China in next 10 years is going to be WeBank. The biggest bank in Latin America is Nubank, 120 million customers. Their nearest competitor, Itaú, has 58 million customers. The largest retail bank in Europe now is Revolut with 50 million customers. HSBC has 39 million customers, and they're a 160-year-old bank. I could continue, right? But in 10 years, that differentiation between digital pure play organizations and sort of traditional players is going to be even more acute than it is today.
Well, question on that,
Look at
or
Chime
somewhat
and
related.
SoFi.
Just
Yeah, look at
from a
crazy.
from a demographic standpoint, as you look forward, what effect do you see on sort of the exit from the need for services of this glut of baby boomers who still resist? They don't like, they want to go into the
Yeah.
bank and have an endorsement, et cetera, et cetera. Is that going to be
I guess
significant,
that's
or is
one
that
of the saving graces because, um, is that they are the customers with the wealth and the assets, right? So one differentiation you still have from traditional banks to digital is the asset size. 10 years ago, we used to hear the arguments against neobanks and against challengers and wallets were, you know what, they're never going to be profitable. Well, all the banks I'm mentioning are highly profitable these days. They're never going to be good as managing risk at us because we've got all the experience as bankers. We now know that's demonstrably false because risk management is a data modeling problem and they have better tech for data modeling. So Nubank, WeBank, all have better credit risk assessment and lower NPL ratios than traditional banks, right? So, and the other one was, they're only growing so much because they're so small today. And still, Nubank is still the fastest growing bank in Latin America, and it has 120 million customers, right? More than their next four competitors combined, and they're still growing faster. So, what's left? The argument that's left today that we had 10 years ago is they're never going to have the asset size that these traditional players have. But then let me flip that on you. How is your asset size as a bank going to help you become AI relevant? The answer is could it be inversely correlated, right? Because you want to defend that asset base so much that you hold off on doing that digital transition because you've got to cater for these baby boomers who still like to come and see someone at the branch. And then when they stop coming, then what have you got?
Well, yeah, I think it's a natural, a natural progression. You listen to your customer and what they need, and then you slowly phase that out as they phase themselves out. One of the things I was going to say when you were talking about monitoring foot traffic and running reports on the foot traffic, it's not just what the foot traffic looks like, it's who are coming in to do the transactions and what are the transactions. Banks are monitoring that very, very carefully right now because they use it for their staffing models. Unfortunately, they're looking at teller transactions when they come up with their staffing models. They're not, most banks are not monitoring the telephone and not monitoring the activity on the desk. So they're staffing branches with one teller that because there's no one ever comes in and makes a cash deposit or a withdrawal, right? But meanwhile, the platform activity is off the charts because the phones are ringing off the hook and they don't have enough people and they look at the reports and they don't follow it. So there's a lot of basic blocking and tackling in community banks that isn't happening just simply because of their staffing models. right?
Well, I think
To Dan's
this is
point,
also
the
this is also a bit of a US problem in terms of the way we've structured banking from an infrastructure perspective. I'll say, because I'll give you an example: FedNow compliance, right? So being linked into the real-time payment system. In Brazil and India, Brazil has like 96% population participation in PIX, which is their real-time payments rail. India, I think 70% of retail commerce will be done on the UPI rails in 2027. China, 95% of all retail commerce is done on mobile today. So that's what we're seeing elsewhere, but we don't have that level of infrastructure available to the community banks without huge expense, right? Whereas in these markets like Brazil, essentially the government mandated this, which again wouldn't happen in the US, and then they provided assistance, technical assistance, and help to do the integration. So the cost of doing that was like 5% of what it would cost to integrate FedNow in the US, as an example. So it's hard. It's hard to do that innovation. That's very true. I don't think that's at issue. But nevertheless, the trends we're seeing offshore all show this technology transformation to be absolutely critical. I mean, look at JP Morgan. Jamie Dimon's been very clear about the threat of fintechs. They're spending $18 billion a year on transformation right now. And, I would say, looking at the top 20 banks, retail banks in the world, there's not a guarantee that, maybe I can think of at least 3 or 4 that I don't think are going to make it.
Mhm, mhm.
Now, there's some regionals that might do pretty well with it. I think Navy Federal Credit Union, as an example, is getting pretty tech. Cap One does very well with it, tech historically. There's a few others that are sort of have had that moment. DBS Bank in Singapore. There are banks that have become more technologically transformed than others, but at the same time, look at Chime in the US. Chime has 40 million customers today. US Bank has 18 million.
Yeah.
Do you think it's the role of the government to step in and help those who are technologically challenged and those that do not have the ability to afford smartphones,
Yeah.
to embrace the technology and learn the technology simply so that they can have a bank account?
I agree. In fact, I've just been invited to take a digital banking license in Bangladesh. And it sounds sort of weird, and as part of that, in terms of doing a rollout of a new digital bank there, we're looking at providing very cheap smartphones on like a $30 US loan to people who are financially excluded today, and that would be their first bank account or first payment instrument, at least. So, I think digital inclusion is very tightly tied to that. Again, this is a bit of a US specific problem. We have 90% internet penetration in the US, but that number has not moved significantly in many years. I think actually it might be up to 95 now, but getting that last mile, the last 5%, one of the problems is, literacy, not financial literacy, just literacy, is that, there's some people that can't necessarily operate apps the way we think of it today because they're not literate, so that in itself is a problem. There's other people unbanked for other reasons, which, we could go into. But, the problem with not having access to mobile like that, John, sorry to cut you off again, and I apologize, because I have this train of thought and I've got to get it all out, but the problem with those elements is, as you rightly forecasted in your question, is that in 15 or 20 years' time, you won't be able to get top tier medical advice unless you have a digital ID on your phone, right? You won't be able to pay for flights on airlines unless you have a mobile wallet on your phone. You won't have access to your own medical records unless they're in the cloud and linked to your phone. Your kids won't be able to get the best education without access to that technology. That's just the way these systems are going. So if you want to stay off the grid or stay working with cash, you're going to find yourself with narrower and narrower and narrower options over time. And so I do think that there is an education process required by the government, but this is at a period of time where we have the lowest trust in government that we've had over the last 100 years. So there's definitely going to be some pain in that transition.
Yeah, and I think that opens up a whole new world. I mean, there's not even a whole new world. Cybersecurity is more important and will
Oh,
be the
yeah.
most
And
important
we
thing.
haven't even talked
I mean,
about quantum day yet,
no.
Q day.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah, I
have
was
to
going to
have you
bring up,
back.
quantum computing. Would love to have you back, but also stable coins. I'm jumping big into stable coins and
Sure.
deposit tokens and how that's going to affect community banks. And if you don't have this type of technology, is the money going to start leaving the deposits and move into stable coins? All the money coming from other countries into U.S. stable coin stuff. That's a whole other
So
Yeah.
can of
the
worms.
US has been clear on its intent, Keith, to be the number one
Number
AI
one.
economy in the world, right?
Yeah.
So if you want to be the number one AI economy in the world, it's not a consumer AI app that is going to enable that. It's automating industry, right?
Yep.
Because the most efficient economies in the world in 2050 will be highly autonomous economies. So that means automating transportation. It means automating energy production. It means automating farming, shipping, automating ports, all of those things, which China is incidentally 10 years into that process already, right?
Yeah.
That's how you become the world's smartest, most efficient autonomous economy.
Yeah.
But there are some real functional challenges with doing that stateside. For example, the big dock worker strike a few years ago, right at the end of Biden's last administration, where they did a deal for 20 years to guarantee no automation in US ports, right?
Yeah.
That was
It's
what the strike
jobs.
was over.
Everybody's
Yeah,
worried about
jobs.
jobs.
Right.
Yeah, it's worried
And
about
yet
jobs.
China, 80% of their ports are fully automated today. So
Yeah.
how can the US compete on shipping, even manufacturing back in the US rather, by reshoring? How do we do that if we can't automate the ports and we can't automate transportation? Yeah, we've got Tesla and others, making sort of good progress on autonomous transportation, but we don't have a single dark factory in the United States. China's up to 70 dark factories right now, which is factories that are fully automated without a single human on the factory floor. That's why they call them dark, because the lights are off, because machines don't need
So
them.
where do those people in China go to work? I mean, they got 1 billion+ people. Are they going to have jobs
Well,
over in China? I mean,
this is where China is paying. They're taxing these tax companies and the profits they make, because with this application of technology, and they're essentially levying that to create new jobs for humans. And a lot of their jobs are in transformation of the economy. So deploying new solar farms, working on new roads, those sorts of things, right? So transformational infrastructure resilience. China in by 2029, China will be deploying the equivalent of the US national electricity grid every year. That amount of energy every year.
wow. But do they have the oil and mineral and do they get all their chips from NVIDIA, which is a US company? Those type of things. Does that help America? Sorry if I'm getting off
Sure.
track here,
I mean, the
John.
CHIPS Act was designed to do
Yeah.
that. What it did really is push China lithography and etching tech, multiple generations ahead. On robotics, like on Android robotic construction, China's ahead there now, which just happened very quickly. They're now beating us on gene therapy and next gen vaccinations. I mean, South Korea's up there, Taiwan, Japan is still a big player in that. But obviously, with the NIH budget reducing and the NHS budget reducing, we're going to see more leadership from non-US sources in terms of those innovations. But that also forced China to be much more efficient with their approach to AI, which led to DeepSeek. Which I'm sure you guys heard of. So there is some, right now China is producing more patents annually than the US, and that's because of this investment in research and stuff that they started many years ago. I think the US has attempted to slow down China by cutting off access to GPUs, by the Chips Act, by they've had sanctions in place and things like that, the tariffs now. But the reality is, I think China's already too far ahead. The biggest challenge for the US coming up is that even on the consumer-focused AI models like ChatGPT, which has, what is it, 5 billion active users in a month, or 5 billion instances. I mean, it's crazy mechanics there. Um, ChatGPT and Anthropic and these guys may be the biggest consumer AI tech. They may be the first to do sort of cognitive AGI, but that's only half the story. We need these massive AI data centers to power that, and we don't have enough energy in the US to do that. And we're cutting subsidies on solar and renewables right now, when that is probably the only form of energy we can scale up quick enough to stay ahead of China on the data center space, right? Nuclear, even if we started building an SNR today, it's still going to be 5 to 7 years before it's ready. If you want to build a new coal or gas plant, it costs more money to run a coal plant today for a year than it is to deploy the equivalent in a solar farm, brand new solar farm, right? So the economics really don't make sense on the investment in fossil fuels, but we do need to improve battery tech. So the improvement in sodium ion batteries and stuff, and even sort of carbon batteries and things like that could happen in the late 2030s. That seems to be sort of a better directionality there. I know I'm veering off into all futurist stuff.
No,
But
that
that's
helps
cool.
that helps with a lot of jobs that people might lose to technology. Somebody needs to build these data centers and run these data centers, and
yep.
something
I mean,
has to
there
be
is that
behind the robots.
transitional,
Yeah.
there is that transitional period, right? Where this is why I say there's two types of people in the world today. Those who are using AI to advance their career or help their business, or, to improve their own capabilities. That's the first type of person, right? The second type of person is those that are going to be displaced by the first.
Yeah. So they have to learn new skills, or help
Yeah.
within that economy, which could be
Yes.
just working at a data center, making sure the data center
Yep.
is up and running.
Or
Yeah, there's
being a
gonna be
trainer for AI, right? Getting paid for our data to train AIs and
yeah.
stuff like that. There's different modalities here, and but ultimately we're probably going to have to think about something like universal basic income as a safety net for large scale technology and employment. I mean, even my co-host at The Futurist, Rob Tursek, he disagrees with this. He says every new technology we've had, we've always created new jobs for humans, right? When the internet displaced jobs, we created 2 jobs for every job that the internet destroyed, and so forth. But we've never had a general technology that has been designed to take humans out of the workforce in the way AI is. And we've never had a technology that has its own agency, and that's what AI has compared with other tech. So you can't imply that the industrial revolution, or the compute revolution, or these things, the space age, and the internet revolution, are analogous to what's going to happen with AI. I don't think.
Yeah.
Let's bring it back to the book, because we are a little
Sorry.
over time. Well, no, look, this is great stuff,
Yeah.
and I
I
honestly
can't
think
ask about robots, and
we
are the
can we
robots
can
going to be serving us
Oh,
burgers
just to
and
give you one quick one on robots. By
yeah, one
2035,
quick yeah,
there's going to
robots.
be 10 billion robots on the planet. That
That's what
includes
I've
autonomous vehicles, factory robots, and humanoid robots. 10 billion.
humanoids.
So that means there's
Yeah.
going to be more robots on the planet than humans.
Wow.
So all I'll suggest is be
I
nice to
told you,
robots.
John.
You
What
never
year
you
you
never
said?
know
What
what's going to
you
happen in the
predicted a year
future.
for that? What was that year?
2035.
10 years.
This
hang
is
And
in
who's
there,
gonna
man.
maybe this
who's
is
gonna
way
make all
too
these
political.
robots? Tesla? Tesla making a lot of robots, or what's going on? Sorry, I
There,
want
as
to
I
know who
said,
to invest in. Who should I
there are
invest in here?
tons of look at Figure, look at Optimus, sure. Look at autonomous vehicles as well. There's a lot of the EVs coming out of China are incredible with this stuff. They're way ahead, unfortunately, of Tesla. But there's so many coming
I just have a
around.
kind of a really
10
broad
billion
question.
robots? Oh my God.
Yeah, think about Amazon drones delivering your
Yeah.
packages. That's a
Oh
robot, right?
geez.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dan, go ahead.
So,
In making your observations, and you've done this for a while, do you find as you look forward in general, and I'll throw this out across the board, maybe specific to banking, maybe not. I don't know. You answer it as you will. Do you find yourself in general optimistic, pessimistic, or dispassionate? In other words, are you are you gauging what's happening and reacting, or do you just kind of watch what happens?
Sorry, I just had an error message pop up on the computer. I fixed it now. Can you repeat the question again?
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. Because you've been doing this for a while, I'm curious, as you continue to look forward, and in either in banking or in general, do you find yourself being optimistic, pessimistic, or dispassionate about what's on the future
Mm.
roadway for us to encounter?
Let's keep it to banking if that's possible.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah. Pessimistic and then optimistic, right? I mean, look,
fair.
like pessimistic because if you try and just do the same thing you've been doing all along, then it's going to be really tough on you. Optimistic in that we are already seeing the new era of banking emerge. It's highly technologically based, embedded experiences. AI is going to improve that. You're going to have a much better personalized experience in terms of access to banking utility in the future than you ever would have, and it will be much more financially inclusive. So, there'll be much more accessibility broadly to financial services that we haven't had in the old world, that we could never have done traditionally with human interfaced banking, right? So that's the upside. The upside, but the larger question is what will banks be doing in the future? And this comes back to Keith's earlier question: is that if yes, retail banking, it's going to be largely about embedded wallets where you have your personal AI that interfaces to your banking agents that you use. Your personal AI will do most of your banking. It'll do most of your discretionary spend and manage that sort of stuff, and you'll just tweak that over time. And then on the business side, the companies who are growing the fastest will be those that use smart contracts, use stable coins to pay for stuff, right? And so you're going to have this entire new layer of financial services, which for autonomous financial services, which will be running those smart contracts and, running agents and creating agent marketplaces and things like that. That's where the massive growth area is in banking. But you'll notice, I haven't talked about other products. Like, for example, there's just not going to be credit cards in the future. They don't make sense in this highly autonomous world. How a credit card reward program is going to stimulate an agentic AI that does your payments from choosing a credit card to make a payment? It's not. Right? Rewards programs, airline miles, cashback, some of that may have some impact. Cashback could, but an agentic AI is just going to find the cheapest, most efficient way or the most effective way to get done what you've asked, right? Access to credit and so forth. You won't say, oh, personal AI, I'm going to call my personal AI probably Alfred, like the
Batman.
Batman's.
Batman's butler.
Hey,
Yeah.
Alfred, I saw that new EV. I want to order one of those. Can you go and find me the best price and tell me, whether I should lease it or whether I should take out a loan for it? And I'll come back, 20 seconds later and say, we found these 6 options. We think this is the best one. Would you like me to proceed? I can deliver the vehicle for you next Thursday. Right. That's essentially the type of interaction. You walk into a grocery store and you don't have enough cash to pay for your groceries, and your smart glass is going to pop up a message saying, warning, you don't have enough cash in your account to do your groceries today, because it knows you already, you typically spend $600 on a grocery shop every 3 weeks. And so it'll say, would you like me to move money out of your savings account, or do you want access to credit? The fee for the credit is this. Right. So all of the instances where we typically would have used a credit card will be replaced by sort of agentic executed credit in real time.
Well,
So you could say,
Americans are out of
wow,
control with credit, and so do you think
So
this is going to
imagine if we
help them
can
keep
turn
it
on the
under
tap of
control?
instant personalized credit anytime you need it. Right. I mean, that's it. That's what's going to happen. You won't need to fill out an application form. If you don't qualify for the loan, you won't see the offer.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow. Um,
Yeah, did you see sorry, did you see what Narmi was doing with Grasshopper the other day, Brett King? Do you know Narmi in the US?
No.
So they're
Yeah, I don't think so. Sorry.
integrating Claude, Anthropic
Yeah.
into I'll send you the I
Yeah,
forget what
send
it
me
is,
the
but
link.
yeah, so the consumers can ask questions through Anthropic or Claude through Narmi into the Grasshopper account and help with questions
Okay,
you're
cool.
just asking.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
so it's
mean,
already coming. Yeah.
yeah, the generative finance stuff is pretty interesting. I don't see anyone really working on those solutions right now. Like, let's look at, Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT. None of them have been trained on financial transaction data, right? Now, Plaid probably has enough data to build an LLM. Nubank acquired Hyperplane, a year and a half ago to do GenFi, their own LLM, dedicated LLM, which will sort of be used for that generative finance. So there's sort of a gap opening up in capabilities there, but we don't really see a lot of projects in the US right now for generative finance with AI, where it can predict your needs from a financial utility perspective or a financial product perspective. For example, you walk into a listed real estate property and you get a notification about what amount of home financing you qualify for. Just simple stuff like that. No one at this point is sort of working on that generation of AI in the US that I'm aware of, but there's a number of projects in China and, for example, and, as I mentioned, in Latin America on that sort of stuff right now.
Yeah.
That begs the question related to the timing element of when do you think that's going to happen? When do you think the need to trickle down to the small community bank to
Yeah.
start to pay attention? Because if the consumer is driving what the bank should be delivering to the consumer, right?
Yep.
So, when do you sort of predict that a community bank should really seriously drop what they're doing and start looking at their servicing models so that it can service the customer with the glasses that can say, hey,
Sure.
move money from my savings account to my
Yeah,
checking
yeah. Sure, sure. So this is where it's interesting. So let me use the internet as an analogy, right? We're probably somewhere like, 99 in terms of where the internet was in 99. That's where we are in AI. But, and it took how long for Amazon? Amazon was 94, I think they incorporated, and then it was like 2014 or whatever that they became profitable, and now they're obviously one of the biggest in the world. But think of the fact that AI is almost is improving at 5 times what the internet or other comparable technologies were at that time. So you have to contract that. So if you say, well, it took 20 years for Amazon to be profitable, we've already got neobanks that are profitable. That's happened in the last 10 years, and AI is going to see a similar sort of acceleration to this. So I would say for community banks by 2027 and 2028, these applications will be like where the iPhone was in 2010.
account.
Oh, wow.
Does that make
20,
sense?
so 2028, did I hear you say?
27, 28, depending on which market you're in. I think the US may lag a little bit. I think China will get there first, and then you've got places like, Dubai. I think like Latin America even, is going to be ahead there. India probably just based on their technology layer that they've got around banking and payments now.
So you've been very generous with your time, and I want to be respectful of it. I do have one little final question. So if we are going to talk directly to the community banks in America, and these again are the 20 billion and unders, and I do want to tee it up for Branch tomorrow, right? Branch tomorrow is coming out middle of September. Is it September 15th? I think you said.
Yes, correct.
Okay, so
You can
September
check
15th.
out the website. It's branchtomorrow.com. And it is listed for pre-ordering Kindle right now on Amazon. I'm not exactly sure of when the physical book is going to be available as yet. We're still working on that with Wiley for distribution in the US, but it is coming out sometime in the next couple of months. But the Kindle version will be available September 15th.
Okay, great. I'm one of these people in that mindset of it's not necessarily about age and it's not necessarily about your job title. It's all about, your mindset within the bank. So, who within a community bank structure, if there is a job title, if there is someone that this book would appeal to help create these champions and start some of these conversations, who can we say absolutely should check this book out and should order a copy? I mean, is it the chief technology officer? Is
Oh,
it?
no. It's look, certainly anyone in a leadership role in a bank today, which is used to branches being really central to their business, they need to read this book because they need to understand what's happening outside of their world. That's the biggest problem is, you can't imagine the disruption unless you see it happening, but people aren't looking in the right place. They're looking at their business, which they're working on reinforcing branch all the time, and they miss the bigger trends of what's happening globally with these things. So that's really the objective here, is to say, look, this is not what's going to happen. This has already happened.
Yeah.
And if you're not strategizing around adapting to this, the risks are only going to get more acute from here, right? And that's not only the risk to your brand, but it's the risk to your job as well. You've got to be technology relevant to survive this process as well.
Almost like saying to the community banks, tsunami has happened, but the wave hasn't hit you yet. Right?
Yeah.
So we have to make sure that our followers and our subscribers and everybody in that community bank world, responsible for retail. So it could be chief retail officer, it could be regional manager, of the branch system. Getting this book into their hands, I think will, knowledge is power. It's going to give them the ability to have much deeper and higher level futuristic conversations about the direction of their community bank in their small little neighborhoods.
And
I
survival
think
thereof.
one good question that I could have asked at the start of this interview, and which I bet if I asked the average community banker, right, if you look around the world, who does more banking, right? Who has more customers? The top 20 banks of the world that do retail, or the top 20 fintechs of the world? Almost everyone listening to this would assume it's the traditional banks.
I don't
So
disagree.
that in itself is the sort of data that people need to see and understand, to understand that this is not, I'm not talking about something that's going to happen in the far future. This has already largely happened. And that means that if it hasn't happened to you yet, you got lucky already.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Those bankers are famous. I mean, we tell ourselves what we want to hear and we'll reinforce it and die on it. It's we believe it. That's the way it goes. So, well, Brett, I thank you for your time very much, and we'll have to have you back on and really go deep dive, because I know Keith is dying to ask more questions about robots. I will make one promise to you.
The flying cars. Where are the flying cars?
I don't think there'll ever be flying cars, Brett, because you know why? There's too much liability up there in the air.
Well,
You'll get sued.
sorry to disappoint you there too, Keith. China in Shenzhen already has commercial drone operations. So these are
What, are they
autonomous.
controlled by regular people? Like, I can't see.
No, they're
John
autonomous taxis.
Yeah, that might happen, like Minority
Autonomous.
Report, but
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's
you're not going to be in
drones.
control of the car at
You're
all.
not flying. No, it's just
oh man,
from point A to point B and
Sorry,
back again.
Dan.
That's it.
I want to be George Jetson in traffic, like zooming around.
Well, let's
Nobody
start. Let's
Nobody
set
would
the bar.
stay in traffic. That's the whole thing. They would just fly away, man.
We got to set the bar a
Never
little bit
happened.
lower. We have to make a dent in that 95% penetration rate Brett mentioned earlier about customers in the U.S. banks having smartphones and banking more on their smartphones. So, Brett, I'll make you a promise. Keith and I will split the cost of the latest, greatest cell phone, and we're going to give it to Dan. And that way we'll make
Awesome.
it. We'll go from 95 to 96.
Yeah, Dan. Yeah. Dan and
My
I
flip phone does just fine, thank you.
Yeah, right.
People are actually going back to the flip phone though, because they want to.
It's cool.
Actually have.
Let me ask you this question, Dan. Do you have a landline at home still?
No, we do not.
Oh, there you
No.
go. Well, that's not so bad. There are still people.
I have an iPhone.
Today.
I do have an iphone.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Well,
but flip phones
gentlemen,
help you detox though. People go to detox. Tech
Yeah, we'll need more of that.
Well,
and people
Brett,
are going
thank
to
you
fall
so
in
much.
love with their AIs too. That's going to be crazy.
That's happening
man.
already.
Yeah.
That's happening. called Psychotic
nother-
Break or something. They're already falling in love with their AIs here in America.
That'll be
It's not good.
episode 5.
Yeah.
But gentlemen, thank
All
you
right.
very much. Brett,
Thank you.
thank you very much. We are
Absolutely.
going to everyone pick up your copy of Branch tomorrow, September 5th. And thank you all very much. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you.